The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Primary phase.
Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 90 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. This planet has, or had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd because on the whole it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained, and lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And some said that even the trees had been a bad move and that no one should ever have left the oceans. And then one day, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, a girl, sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth, suddenly realized what it was that had been going wrong all this time, and she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time it was right, it would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get to a phone to tell anyone, the Earth was unexpectedly demolished to make way for a new hyperspace bypass, and so the idea was lost forever. Meanwhile, Arthur Dent has escaped from the Earth in the company of a friend of his, who has unexpectedly turned out to be from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse. His name is Ford Prefect, for reasons which are unlikely to become clear again at the moment, and they are both in dead trouble with the captain of a Vogon spaceship.
So, Earthlings, I present you with a simple choice. Think carefully, for you hold your very lives in your hands. Now choose. Either die in the vacuum of space, or tell me how good you thought my poem was.
I liked it.
Good.
Oh, yes, I thought that some of the metaphysical imagery was particularly effective.
Yes?
Oh, and interesting rhythmic devices, too, which seem to counterpoint the
Counterpoint the surrealism of the underlying metaphor of the,
humanity of the,
Vagonity.
What?
Vagonity.
Oh, Vagonity, sorry. Of the poet's compassionate soul, which contrives through the medium of the verse structure to sublimate this, transcend that, and come to terms with the fundamental dichotomies of the other, and one is left with a profound and vivid insight into
whatever it was the poem was about.
Oh,
Well done, Arthur. That was very good.
so what you're saying is that I write poetry because underneath my mean, callous, heartless exterior, I really just want to be loved. Is that right?
Well, I mean, yes, don't we all, deep down, you know?
Well, you're completely wrong. I just write poetry to throw my mean, callous, heartless exterior into sharp relief. I'm going to throw you off the ship anyway. Good! Take the prisoners to number 3 airlock and throw them out.
You can't throw us off into deep space. We're trying to write a book.
I don't want to die now. I've still got a headache. I don't want to go to heaven with a headache. I'd be all cross and wouldn't enjoy it.
You can't do this.
Why not, you puny creature?
Oh, why not? Why not? Does there have to be a reason for everything? Why don't you just let us go on a mad impulse? Go on, live a little, surprise yourself.
Counterpoint the surrealism of the underlying metaphor. Death's too good for them.
Oh! me, you brute!
Don't you worry. I'll think of something.
Resistance is useless.
I woke up this morning and thought I'd have a nice, relaxed day.
All right.
Do a bit of reading, brush the dog.
I know.
It's now just after 4 in the afternoon and I'm already being thrown out of an alien spaceship 5 light years from the smoking remains of the Earth.
All right, just stop panicking.
Who said anything about panicking? This is still just a culture shock.
Arthur, you're getting hysterical. Shut up.
Resistance is useless.
You can shut up as well.
Resistance is useless.
Oh, give it a rest. Do you really enjoy this sort of thing?
Resistance is... What do you mean?
I mean, does it give you a full, satisfying life? Stomping around, shouting, pushing people out of spaceships?
Well, the arts are good.
They have to be.
But now you come to mention it, I suppose most of the actual minutes are pretty lousy. Except some of the shouting I quite like. Resistance
Yeah,
is...
sure, yes, you're good at that, I can tell. But if it's mostly lousy, then why do you do it? What is it? The girls? The leather? The machismo?
I don't know. I think I just sort of do it, really.
There, Arthur, you think you've got problems.
Yes, this guy's still half throttling me.
Yeah, but try and understand his problem.
Right, so, what's the alternative?
Well, stop doing it, of course.
Well, doesn't sound that great to me.
Well, wait a minute, that's just the start. There's more to it than that, you see.
No, I think if it's all the same to you, I'd better just get you both shoved into this airlock and then go get on with some other bits of shouting I've got to do.
I mean, come on, now look.
Thanks for taking an interest. Bye now.
No, don't do it.
No, listen, there's a whole world you don't know anything about. I mean, here, how about this? Da-da-da-dum. I mean, doesn't that stir anything in you?
Bye. I'll mention what you said to my aunt.
Potentially bright lad, I thought.
We're trapped now, aren't we?
Yes, we're trapped.
Well, didn't you think of anything?
Oh, yes.
Yes?
But unfortunately, it rather involved being on the other side of the airtight hatchway they've just sealed behind us.
So what happens next?
The hatchway in front of us will open automatically in a moment, and we'll shoot out into deep space and asphyxiate in about 30 seconds.
So this is it? We're going to die?
Yes. Except... no. Wait a minute. What's this switch?
What? Where?
No, I was only fooling. We are going to die after all.
You know, it's at times like this, when I'm trapped in a Vogon airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space, that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young.
Why? What did she tell you?
I don't know, I didn't listen.
Terrific.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a truly remarkable book. The introduction starts like this. Space, it says, is big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the street to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. Listen. And so on. After a while, the style settles down a bit, and it starts telling you things you actually need to know, like the fact that the fabulously beautiful planet Bethselamin is now so worried about the cumulative erosion caused by 10 million visiting tourists a year that any net imbalance between the amount you eat and the amount you excrete whilst on the planet is surgically removed from your body weight when you leave. So every time you go to the lavatory there, it's vitally important to get a receipt. In the entry in which it talks about dying of asphyxiation 30 seconds after being thrown out of a spaceship, it goes on to say that what with space being the size it is, the chances of being picked up by another craft within those seconds are 2 to the power of 267,709 to 1 against, which, by a staggering coincidence, was also the telephone number of an Islington flat where Arthur once went to a very good party and met a very nice girl whom he entirely failed to get off with. Though the planet Earth, the Islington flat and the telephone have all now been demolished, it is comforting to reflect that they are in some small way commemorated by the fact that 29 seconds later Ford and Arthur were in fact rescued.
Improbability factor high.
There you are. I told you I'd think of something.
Oh, sure.
Bright idea of mine. To find a passing spaceship and get rescued by it.
Oh, come on. The chances against it were astronomical.
Don't knock it. It worked. Now, where are we?
Well, I hardly like to say this, but it looks like the seafront at Southend.
God, I'm relieved to hear you say that.
Why?
Because I thought I must be going mad.
Perhaps we weren't rescued after all. Perhaps we died.
What's that meant to mean?
When I was young, I used to have this nightmare about dying. I used to lie awake at night, screaming. All my school friends went to heaven or hell, and I was sent to Southend.
Perhaps we'd better ask somebody what's going on. How about that man over there?
The one with the 5 heads crawling up the wall?
Yes.
Sir? Excuse me? Excuse me? You know, if this is Southend, there's something very odd about it.
You mean the way the sea stays steady as a rock and the buildings keep washing up and down? Yes, I thought that was odd.
2 to the power of 100,000 to 1 against and falling.
What was that?
It sounds like a measurement of probability. Hey, that couldn't mean... No.
What?
I'm not sure, but it means we definitely are on some kind of spaceship.
Southend seems to be melting away. The stars are swirling. A dust bowl. Snow. My legs are drifting off into the sunset. Hell, my left arm's come off too. How am I going to operate my digital watch now? Ford, you're turning into a penguin. Stop it!
2 to the power of 75,000 to 1 against and falling.
Hey, who are you? Where are you? What's going on? And is there any way of stopping it?
Please relax. You are perfectly safe.
That's not the point. The point is that I am now a perfectly safe penguin, and my colleague here is rapidly running out of limbs.
It's all right, I've got them back now.
2 to the power of 50,000 to 1 against and falling.
Admittedly, they're longer than I usually like them, but...
Isn't there anything you feel you ought to be telling us?
Welcome to the Starship Heart of Gold. Please do not be alarmed by anything you see or hear around you. You are bound to feel some initial ill effects as you've been rescued from certain death at an improbability level of 2 to the power of 267,709 to 1 against, possibly much higher. We are now cruising at a level of 2 to the power of 25,000 to 1 against and falling, and we will be restoring normality as soon as we are sure what is normal anyway. Thank you. 2 to the power of 20,000 to 1 against and falling.
Arthur, this is fantastic. We've been picked up by a ship with the new infinite improbability drive. This is really incredible, Arthur. Arthur? What's happening?
Ford, there's an infinite number of monkeys outside who want to talk to us about this script for Hamlet they've worked out.
The infinite improbability drive is a wonderful new method of crossing interstellar distances in a few seconds without all that tedious mucking about in hyperspace. The principle of generating small amounts of finite improbability by simply hooking the logic circuits of a Bambolini 57 sub-meson brain to an atomic vector plotter suspended in a strong Brownian motion producer, say a nice hot cup of tea, were of course well understood, and such generators were often used to break the ice at parties by making all the molecules in the hostess's undergarments simultaneously leap 1 foot to the left, in accordance with the theory of indeterminacy. Many respectable physicists said that they weren't going to stand for that sort of thing, partly because it was a debasement of science, but mostly because they didn't get invited to those sort of parties. Another thing they couldn't stand was the perpetual failure they encountered in trying to construct a machine which could generate the infinite improbability field needed to flip a spaceship between the furthest stars, and in the end, they grumpily announced that such a machine was virtually impossible. Then, one day, a student who'd been left to sweep up the lab after a particularly unsuccessful party found himself reasoning this way. If such a machine is a virtual impossibility, then it must logically be a finite improbability. So all I have to do in order to make one is to work out exactly how improbable it is, then feed that figure into the finite improbability generator, give it a fresh cup of really hot tea, and then turn it on. He did this and was rather startled to discover that he'd managed to create the long-sought-after infinite improbability generator out of thin air. It startled him even more when just after he was awarded the Galactic Institute's prize for extreme cleverness, he got lynched by a rampaging mob of respectable physicists who had finally realized that the one thing they really couldn't stand was a smartass.